Hey, community, and welcome to A Piece of Faith, the podcast, the space where faith meets real life. And I'm your host, Angeline, a Christian, a licensed mental health therapist, a poet, and just a woman out here navigating healing, purpose, love, success, and everything in between. This podcast is for the strong ones, the thriving ones, the healing ones, the curious ones, the ones doing the inner work and trying to stay grounded in God while showing up in a world that doesn't always get it. Here, we talk about mental health in the Black community, dating while healed or healing, growing in faith, fitness, purpose, and sometimes we just laugh and have real talk. So grab your tea, in my case, my coffee, and take a deep breath and let's grow together piece by piece. Welcome back, community, to A Piece of Faith, the podcast. I am so grateful you're here. And if you listen to the first episode of the season, we talked about the idea of becoming in real time, becoming while life is still happening, and becoming in a world that can feel uncertain, overwhelming, and definitely chaotic at times. And today I want to talk about something that often becomes part of the process when we think about becoming, which is letting go. Sometimes becoming who we are meant to be requires us releasing the version of life that we thought we would have by now. Now, I need to preface this by saying I am truly grateful for the life I've been blessed with. I have an amazing family. I have parents who are still alive and together. My grandmother, is blessed to be able to have 80 years of life and prayerfully and counting. I have a amazing supportive sister. I have niece, nephews, and just amazing God kids in my life and supportive friendships that have lasted decades. I'm grateful for beautiful opportunities and definitely grateful for a village of people who pour into me and people I'm able to pour back into as well. So I definitely don't take that for granted. There's still been so many prayers that have been answered in my life, and I'm truly appreciative and have so much gratitude. But I have to be honest, even with gratitude, there's also been some grief there. Because if I'm honest, hmm, there were parts of my life that I thought would look different by now. Like many of us, I had what would you call it, a timeline, like a checklist in my mind, graduating college in 4 years, which I did, earn my master's degree before turning 30, which I did, build meaningful career, which I have been able to do. I'm blessed to do, really. But I also thought I would be married by 30. I thought I would have my first child by 33. I thought certain pieces of my life would come together in a certain order, in a certain timing, in a certain way. Didn't turn out that way. And now being in my late 30s, I'm 39 and turning 40 this year, I'm in a season where I'm learning to let go of this picture I once had in my mind. And I want to say this gently because sometimes we don't talk about this enough. Letting go of a life that you thought you would have can be a grieving process. Often we talk about grief as if it's only about, thinking about the people that we lose, right? Losing people. We think about physical loss. We think about major life changes that are visible. God forbid, we have medical issues or just significant, like huge losses, right? But there's a certain type of grief that isn't always talked about openly, the grief of unmet expectations, the grief of, you know, timelines that didn't unfold the way that we imagined in our mind, that we planned in our mind, and that we dreamed and hoped for and desired. The grief of a future we quietly planned in our hearts. That's heavy. There's a heaviness and knowing that those expectations, that timeline is not being met. And when that vision doesn't happen in the timing we expected or the way we expected, there can be a real sense of mourning. And sometimes people don't always recognize that as grief. But I want to be very clear, it is. because you're releasing something that mattered to you. You're letting go of an idea that once gave you comfort, that once maybe gave you hope for some, depending on, just depending on the person who's listening to this. For me, it was a sense of comfort, you know, you start to have to adjust, right? To a reality that may look different than what you hoped for. That can bring up sadness. That can bring up, like I said earlier, like a heaviness. Definitely disappointment, confusion, and if we're being honest, fear. Fear that maybe we missed the boat or we missed out on, you know, what we had envisioned planned. But what I'm learning in this season is this. Two things can be true at the same time. You can be very grateful and still grieve. You can appreciate where you are and still acknowledge what you had hoped for or what you still hope for. You can love your life and still be honest about what feels tender, what feels heavy. Uh, grief does not mean you're ungrateful or anything like that. At least for me, I'm definitely understanding that I can be so grateful and still grieve the future and the timeline that I have for myself is not working out the way that I had envisioned. Grief simply means something mattered to you, and sometimes healing happens when we really give ourselves permission to acknowledge that both are true. Gratitude and grief can exist together. And that grief is happening is because that what you had hoped for, what you had planned, what you had envisioned really did matter to you. I think sometimes we pressure ourselves to move quickly past disappointment and we tell ourselves we should be thankful. We tell ourselves that everything happens for a reason. And as much as that is true, there's a lot of truth with that. Understand that healing often requires honesty, and there's a space for that. It requires a space to be honest with yourself, and that compassion is also within that space. Compassion towards ourselves, because letting go of a vision, of a dream, of the to-do list, the checklist, right? It's not easy. Letting go of or surrendering control, and especially surrendering that control and giving it to God. Understand that his ways are not our ways, and leaning in, trusting his understanding, not ours, is hard. Letting go can feel like trusting God in a deeper way. Letting go can sometimes feel like maybe my life is unfolding differently than I planned, but that doesn't mean it's not unfolding, or it's unfolding incorrectly, if that makes sense, right? Let like let me say that again. Let me get my thought process together. What I'm trying to say is that realizing just because it's not unfolding the way that we envisioned or planned it doesn't mean that it's unfolding incorrectly. Doesn't mean that things are not happening as if God didn't already see this. There's a scripture that talks about man plans his ways and God laughs. And not necessarily laughs, but understanding that God has the final say and he knows better for our lives than we know for ourselves. Sometimes letting go allows us to see the possibilities that we can see before. Sometimes letting go allows us to see what we thought was good, God has for better. And what we thought we wanted, God has no, I'm doing this and I'm not letting this unfold because it's a form of protection. Sometimes letting go helps us stop measuring our lives against timelines that were never meant to define our worth. And sometimes letting go also allows us to fully embrace the season we're in instead of constantly feeling like we're behind. It allows us to be present. If I'm being honest, it allows us to just be in the moment. So I definitely want to encourage you. If you're in a season where life doesn't look the way you thought it would, I want you to know that you're definitely not alone. I'm there too. If there are parts of your story that feels unfinished, you're not alone. I'm there too. If you're learning to release timelines and expectations or plans you once held closely, again, you are not alone. It's okay to grieve what you imagine. It's okay to feel the weight of adjusting. It's okay to take your time in making peace with where you are. Healing does not always happen after everything is resolved. It just doesn't. Sometimes healing happens in real time. As we learn to trust, healing is happening. As we learn to surrender, guess what? Healing is happening. And as we learn to embrace the life, I think, right? The life that is still unfolding. I really want you guys to, I'm saying this to myself and I'm also saying this to you. Your story, our story, my story is still being written. Life is not like our life is, I'll say this, right? And I hope you also embrace this that, your life is not behind schedule at all. Your journey, my journey, our journey is still meaningful. And then what is meant for you, please understand that God will make sure that you receive it. It's not going to pass you by at all. In what is it, in Proverbs, I think it's 3, and verse 5, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, and allow your ways to submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Right. And then one of my favorite scriptures is Ecclesiastics 3:1. Well, the whole chapter 3, right? It starts off with, to everything there's a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. What? Right? Like the Lord knew. So even if life looks different than we imagine, God is still ordering our steps. He's still planning the timeline. He has the timeline in his hands. The purpose remains, and you are definitely not behind. And even when we have to let go, we can trust that nothing meant for us will miss us. Now, community, I hope this episode blessed you. And if, it blessed you, share it with somebody else. And hopefully it will bless them too. I'll talk with you in the next episode, okay? Be blessed, community. A Piece of Faith, the podcast. I am out.